True North is an original podcast by Due North PR. We do everything we can to ensure that everything we broadcast is fair and factual, but the opinions expressed and statements made by our guests are theirs and theirs alone. These opinions and statements do not reflect the views or opinions of our presenters, Due North PR, or the podcast itself. You're listening to True North, a regular roundup of business and community news and developments in Northland. Hello and welcome to True North. Thank you for taking the time to listen. It's Wednesday, the 6th of August. I'm Peter Heath. On the show ahead,
it's important that we have a view about what the purpose of the organisation is, whether it be local government, family business, or listed company, and that the agreed purpose is followed through effectively. And I think it's too lucid a control at the moment across the board.
I speak with Mike Simm, one of our region's most senior business leaders, about how Northland needs to sharpen up when it comes to the governance of its businesses and its organisations, and how, by leveraging local insights and fostering a culture of accountability, organisations can ensure that their governance practices are not only compliant, but also deeply connected to the communities they serve. First, though, a look at what's happening in business and community news across our region. Another quick update on where we're at with local water done well and the status we reported last time. All three district councils have now agreed to push ahead with the recommendation by a cross-council working group, the Northland Water Services Working Group, to establish a combined council-controlled water services organisation by the 1st of July 2027 for the delivery of drinking and wastewater services, with responsibility for stormwater to remain with each individual council. The move has been hailed by industry commentator Nick Davis, a partner at Martin Jenkins, as a positive step for Northland and a pragmatic solution to the challenges facing Far North District Council and Kaipara District Council in particular. However, as we foreshadowed with great astuteness back in April in our Episode 3 discussion with Far North Mayor Moko Tapania, Māori are not happy, at least some Far North Māori. They claim that hapu and iwi were shut out of the discussion, as well as representation on the shareholder group. NZME quotes Far North Deputy Mayor Kelly Stratford as saying her council was being forced into the regional CCO in a manner that, quotes, wasn't comfortable, close quotes. The Northland councils must now work against the clock to put together a water services delivery plan before the government's September the 3rd deadline. We'll continue to keep you updated with any meaningful developments. And finally, muddled thinking and mixed messaging persists around the topic of an updated national freight demand study. Last conducted all the way back in 2017-2018, the National Freight Demand Study does what it says on the tin. It studies the national demand for freight. In so doing, it helps people understand current and future freight patterns, forecast demand in certain locations, and make policy decisions around logistics infrastructure. Business Desk revealed recently that the Ministry of Transport chose not to undertake a long overdue refresh of the study after spending $164,000 on consultants to provide advice on a new iteration. Cue outrage from many involved in the business of freight logistics and supply. And now, just as predictably, cue some ministerial backtracking. Transport Minister Chris Bishop has said that he's acutely conscious of the importance of freight to the New Zealand economy, which is nice, and that he's actively exploring options to commission an update to the study. Business Desk put the minister's statement to the ministry, who now simply say that a decision has yet to be made. Watch this space. We certainly will be. Now, I'm delighted to have with me today one of Northland's most senior business leaders to talk about governance best practice and how it can contribute to increasing Northland's economic growth. Mike Simm was recently awarded the Institute of Directors' highest honour, the title of Distinguished Fellow, for his contributions to governance in small organisations, with a particular reference to Northland. He's the first Northlander to receive this honour. Mike was inducted into the Northland Business Hall of Fame in 2012 for his services to local tourism and economic development, a story that started in 1990 when he and two partners bought the iconic Fuller's tourism business, then in receivership. They successfully turned it around to the point where, in 2000, Fuller's Bay of Islands defeated Wellington's Te Papa to win the annual NZ Tourism Supreme Award for the best tourism business in New Zealand. Mike sold his share in the business in 2002 to pursue a career in corporate governance. Now, since then, he's served as a director of the NZ Tourism Board, the NZ Conservation Authority, Top Energy, Hawkins Construction, Te Puia Enterprise Northland, Tourism Northland, Waitangi Limited, and other organisations. Welcome, Mike, and thanks for joining us on True North.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, congratulations on your nomination as a distinguished fellow with the Institute of Directors.
Well, thank you. It's a bit trite to say, but it's about an award to recognise a whole lot of other people that have done things to raise the awareness of governance in smaller businesses and not-for-profits and family businesses and all those sort of organisations that we have in great numbers in the north that often get left out of the debate around good governance.
Yeah. So, Mike, listen, I'd like to kick off with a very simple but equally challenging question. Are our region's businesses being served well at board level, do you think? And is the picture different for our larger businesses than for some of our small to medium-sized enterprises?
Well, I think the easy answer always is we can do better. But perhaps before I answer like that, we need to just define what we're talking about here. So governance in the context of organisations referred to systems of rules, practices and processes by which an entity is directed and controlled. It involves setting strategic direction, overseeing operations, ensuring accountability and managing risks. Basically, it helps entities to achieve their fundamental purpose. The IOD does a very good job in trying to break this down into small sections in their publication called 4 Pillars of Governance Best Practice. And those 4 pillars are determining purpose, effective governance culture, holding to account, and effective compliance. So in answering your question, I think the best way to do it is to try and look at those 4 pillars and see where we're being let down. And in my view, one stands out very clearly, and that's holding to account. So there are a lot of organisations that have in the north that have boards, but the effectiveness is determined to a large extent by how well the boards hold management and people that report to them to account in terms of delivering the strategic direction that they have. So I think it depends on, I think we can do better, to answer your question, and I think the issue that will change the dial quickly and significantly is if we recognise the need to hold to account so that agreed directions, purpose are actually followed through and delivered upon.
So are you saying that Northland boards are not holding Northland management teams and executive teams to account in some way? Can you
yes, I am, and perhaps an example
for you.
Perhaps an example for you is local government, I think, does that poorly. The good example for me, one of my recent experiences being with the great ride that Northland has, and the management group that looks after that. That's the Northland Cycle Trail Trust, which is funded largely by the Whanau District Council. And the funding takes place annually, several hundreds of thousands of dollars, and there is zero requirement for reporting on how that funding is spent. And I don't think it's very clear either what strategy they're spending against. So in terms of the 4 pillars, determining purpose is the first and most important pillar, and that's about getting the right sort of agreement on strategic direction. And holding to account in terms of delivering and management delivering against that agreed strategy is where the effectiveness comes in. And that's where I think that we could do significantly better in Northland. So there are many examples, but local government one is that affects all of us. We all pay rates into the council, and the money gets then distributed out to causes that that local government thinks are important. But if it's not followed through, and the body that's spending that money is not held accountable, then we have to wonder whether our rates money is being effectively applied, and whether that organisation is operating effectively as well.
Yeah, but that's local government, which is slightly different to a commercial organisation. Or are you thinking of the elected representatives as being, if you like, those in the governance role?
I am, but I think there are many examples in business where holding to account is lost to a degree. I think that
I don't necessarily want you to go in and name names that could become a little bit thorny, but I take your point that your view is that with a number of different organizations across Northland, there's some kind of a falling down in the holding to account side of things. Do you feel that that's a Northland specific problem? Do you think it's a regional New Zealand kind of problem? Do you think it's a business size kind of problem? What's the underlying cause there, Mike?
Well, I've tried to say, which was part of my recognition the other day, that these aspects are common across family businesses just as much as they are at the top end. So in Northland, it's family business or channel infrastructure. That the principles of good governance are the same. So it's important that we have a view about what the purpose of the organisation is, whether it be local government, family business, or listed company, and that the agreed purpose is followed through effectively. And I think it's too lucid a control at the moment across the board. And I think in Northland, because we haven't had enough good case studies that people can see the difference between being passive in terms of accountability versus being much more rigorous. And the rigour comes really from, and holding to account comes from regular reporting, formal reporting, continually reviewing the strategic direction and the purpose of the business, and then making sure that the actions that are being taken are aligned to and meet everyone's expectation. And when they don't, that variances from what was expected are quickly and accurately and astutely reported and acted upon, or strategies are changed to make sure that money is the organisation is continuing to effectively use the resources that they have. And I think that it's too easy, and perhaps in Northland it's more so than others, because we've got smaller organisations, many of whom are funded by local government or central government, who I think are particularly poor in this space. And so it's casual and loose, and it's a case of spending the money, and the timeframes are not accurately monitored, nor are the achievements against what was originally expected.
Mike, what sort of businesses do you think are best served through having a board of directors, and how does a firm transition from that state of governance by management into a situation where the management team is being assisted by a properly constituted board of directors?
You start off as a sole trader, and your mentors or your advisors or the governance role is undertaken by your parents or your mates or people you work alongside, and then it gets bigger, and you become, you get to a stage where you need a formal advisor, and then the next stage seems to be an advisory board, and then it becomes a board of directors. And so the governance role becomes more obvious once you're looking at looking after other people's money, and shareholders come into the scene, or beneficiaries or ratepayers or whatever. So as more people, as you're representing and using other people's money, so does governance become more important. And the distinction between governance and management also becomes more important. In that interim stage, it's not that easy. And I've seen many situations where the familiarity of people that have developed a business, and now they want to be a director and also work every day in the business. And how do they make that distinction? And it's difficult, but you have to do it by being more formal. You have to say on the third Tuesday of every month, we're going to have a board meeting, and it's going to be maybe off premises or somewhere different, and we're going to have minutes for it and have some board papers. And you've actually not to wear your hazard vest and your overalls to the meeting. You've actually got to change your persona so that you're actually acting as a director on that day. And I think, it's a difficult thing to do, to separate. And when you've got the same people doing both jobs, it's even harder. And that's the way you've got to do it. You've got to formalize that situation so that you can step back or try and step back and say, what is the purpose of this business? What are we trying to achieve? Let's put that down in writing. Let's make sure we all agree with the purpose of the business. We're not going to leave until we do get commonality, because if we don't have that, we're going to be going off in all sorts of different directions, and we're not going to make any real impact. So we want to agree on what the purpose is. We want to do that by stepping aside and acting as though we are in a governance role rather than a management role. And whilst they may be the same person doing both, we need to make sure that we clearly have an understanding of how they're different. And then being held to account by your other fellow family members or directors or whatever, if you're in both these roles, to deliver on what was agreed was the purpose. So not easy, but that's the way you have to evolve into getting to a bigger and bigger size when those things become clearer.
So, Mike, some of our larger organizations have got some pretty awesome talent around the board table. Quite often, these leaders are based in places other than Northland. How important is it that this out-of-region expertise is balanced by people who can look at an organization's governance through a local lens? Or is that type of thinking just immensely parochial and unhelpful, do you think?
Well, I don't think there's one answer to that question. I think that it's dependence on the importance of the business, the purpose of the business, and how it affects local people. A governance experience and an empathy with local issues, in my opinion, is extremely important. And some of these other technical issues that seem to dominate in terms of filling a skills-based board up can be brought in by hiring those people as consultants on those particular technical issues.
Now, that's interesting, because that leads on really, really nicely to the next question that I had, which was, in your view, do we have enough governance level talent living and working right here in Northland? Or to frame the question in a different way, is there a potential pool of untapped governance expertise in the region beyond the same few faces that we see again and again and again on board after board after board here in Northland? And look, if so, if there is this potential pool of untapped governance, is there an argument to say that Northland businesses should be drawing more deeply from this? So the question then becomes, I guess, to your point just a minute ago, what needs to happen to access that pool of untapped expertise? Because it is sitting there, in my view, untapped.
Yes, well, the IOD have a role to play in this. The Institute of Directors have a very high profile in the top end of town, and particularly in the metropolitan areas in New Zealand. And they are just starting to realise that the principles of good governance apply equally to the regions and to smaller businesses. So they have got some good programs starting in terms of exposing young people who are in management roles to the governance and the difference between governance and management, and perhaps trying to point them in a direction that they can get some exposure to board experience. So you've got to start somewhere, and we've got to start by trying to identify people who have, in the north, typically they've had experience in the main centres or been overseas. They've come back. They've maybe come back from a major finance house in London or something, and they're working in a much smaller business in Northland. So they've had exposure to big stuff and know the difference between good governance and no governance. And so they've got to be sourced. They've got to be identified, brought out. And we do have to make a conscious effort to take people on in a sort of an apprenticeship role. And the AOD has an emerging directors program, which has some good outlines for that, where younger people or inexperienced directors are able to come and be observers on boards, participate, not vote. They're covered by insurance, but they're typically kept a little bit aside of some of the liability issues. But there is a program to bring forward young potential directors, and we need to be doing more to encourage that. If my previous point about having an empathy with the area and the employees and the customers is to have a higher profile in the way we govern Northland businesses.
So, Mike, quite often you see the same few Northland-based directors on any number of local boards. What's the upside of this phenomenon, and is there a downside?
Yep. Well, the upside is there's the benefits and experience, and that comes with some continuity. So people that have been around for a while, they learn from mistakes that have been made in other contexts they have, and what have you. The downside is that we don't always have the right skills. The requirements of businesses and organisations can change rapidly. And if we continue to not rotate directors, as is the best practice, then we're not effectively governing today's issues. So I think that's important to recognise that the requirements change and therefore the skills change.
Mike, do you think age should be a factor in board composition? There's a lot of progressive thinking in any number of areas of governance. And some organizations with an exclusively older and, dare I say, typically male governance profile, and we typically have had a lot of those in Northland, just don't get it. So in some cases, they seem stuck in the corporate mindset of the 80s and the 90s. Are younger directors helpful in shaping corporate change at board level? And if so, is this input important?
Yes, I think that's a very good point. And, diversity is something that we encounter in many facets of life at the moment, and it's equally important on boards. And it's because so does the environment change, and therefore the boards have to change with that, as we've just been talking about. And some of that change can't be affected by some of these older people with a lot of experience, because the old experience doesn't necessarily apply at all in some cases, like AI, for example, cybercrime and other issues that organisations are now facing. So I think it's very important. So that comes down to the recruiters and those people who are appointing new directors to be made aware of the fact that the purpose of the business has changed, and therefore the skill sets are different. And in some cases, young people are the only ones that have got those skill sets. Mm. So that's quite important. Cultural aspects are becoming much more important in New Zealand. And that doesn't always have to be older people. I think that sometimes younger people have a different way of expressing that, and that may be easier for the organisation to take up as well. It may be that they come aboard as emerging directors and they can provide the board of perhaps older white males with some views about how they can have a positive influence on the board in the future. And typically, many of those people in the IOD's Emerging Directors Program continue on and become permanent appointees to the board after a year, after which the rest of the board have seen what they're missing out on and how typically a younger, more diverse mindset can contribute to making the delivery of purpose more meaningful and more productive.
Are Northland companies paying directors enough, do you think, Mike? Or conversely, are we paying over the odds in order to attract the talent we need out into the sticks?
I don't really know that answer to that, and that I can only say from my personal experience, and it varies significantly depending on the size of the organisation. But anecdotally, just to start that conversation off, because I get this question quite a lot for people saying, "Well, I have got a board, and they we meet quarterly or monthly, and I don't know how much to pay them. They started off not being paid anything, and how much do I pay them now?" So anecdotally, the number is that the chair would get 20% of the CEO's salary, and the independent board members 10 to 12%. So if the company's grown and the CEO's been paid $100,000, then you would look to pay the chair $20,000 and the other directors $10,000 or maybe 12 if they had some other committee responsibilities. And that's very general, but it's a starting point to have the discussion around. And I've seen some others where there have been family business and one independent director who becomes the chair to referee these family arguments and other bits and pieces, and they're paid significantly more than 20% of the CEO's salary because of the experience they bring to the table. And in that case, it's a one person, and family businesses is often this referee, and you become much more than a business advisor. You become a family advisor and all sorts of other roles that you didn't expect to have when you took it all on. Mm. But 20% chair, 10% for the rest. And I think a board of 3, 5, 7 max is optimal. 5 is, in my opinion, has been really good. And they need to be an effective governance team, so they need to be committed. They need to be committed to the organisation. They need to have an empathy with what's trying to be achieved, and they need to accept the fact that they're going to be in a team to be effective. So they don't always get their own way, but they've got to understand how the consensus has been achieved at and accept that. And if all those things happen and we have effective holding to account, then I think good boards will deliver better productivity for Northland businesses.
Fantastic. Mike, this has been fascinating. Thank you very, very much indeed for your time. Was there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to get off your chest?
No, I think we've done a good sweep. My award the other day was about recognising that business governance is something that covers a much broader spectrum than just listed public companies. And when you think about it, and if you look at it through this lens of the 4 pillars of best governance practice and the need for defining the purpose, having an effective governance culture, holding to account, and making sure that you're compliant with legal regulations, those things all apply to the pony club or the successful family business or the large not-for-profit or the small or the SME or the listed company. That they all touch those points. They might be more difficult in the smaller scale to separate as you might like, but recognizing that and trying to perform as a governor, so change the role every now and again and take your high vis off and go to some other room and have some minutes, whether it be the school committee or the or channel infrastructure, they all have to touch those same things. So I think there's a bit of a job for the IOD to do in terms of selling the importance of good governance, and in doing so to motivate people to either come out of hiding, the ones that you talked about that have come north, or young people who have been successful and have been in bigger organisations who have seen how good governance can impact productivity. We've got to encourage them to be more proactive and participate more in governance in entities in Northland. And I'm confident that that we can do that. I think the tide is changing. People are starting to recognise that governance applies right across the spectrum. And if we can do that well, then I think North will be better for it. And one of the goals of all that would be that we get a Ngāpuhi settlement. And when we get a Ngāpuhi settlement, we need good governance to ensure that the settlement money is used in the most effective and productive manner.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Mike. Mike Simm, I very much appreciate your time. All the very, very best. And I'm sure we'll see you around the traps.
All right. Thanks, Peter.
And that's all for today's program. Many thanks to Northland Senior Governance expert Mike Simm. True North will return in 2 weeks' time on the 20th of August, when I'll be speaking with prominent Northlanders Tanya McInnes and Cheryl Mai about what they're calling heart-led leadership. What is it? Why do we need it? And does it stand a snowball's chance in hell of surviving first contact with some of our more hard-bitten and cynical leadership and governance teams? I'm Peter Heath. Thank you for joining us. True North is an original podcast by Due North PR. To support our work and to stay on top of Northland business news and analysis, access the pod on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Please do take that small extra step and subscribe, like, follow, comment, and review, as it helps others find the show. Please also share it with those who may not yet be aware that we exist. As the New Zealand media landscape continues to change, we rely on your support to continue doing what we do. Please let us know what you think about the podcast. Ask questions or make suggestions about topics and people we should feature by emailing us at truenorth@duenorthpr.co.nz. We do read every message.